The first light of dawn crept through the delicate lattice windows of the Topkapi Palace, painting soft, golden streaks across the silken cushions of the harem. The air was thick with the scent of rosewater and jasmine, drifting lazily from the fountains and gardens beyond the walls. Every sound seemed muted, filtered through layers of velvet and whispered secrets, as if the world outside had been replaced by a realm of soft murmurs and gentle, deliberate movements. Layla stirred from her cushions, stretching her arms and feeling the smooth silk of her night robe slide across her skin. The harem had always been a place of paradoxes, luxury and restraint, freedom and confinement, laughter and loneliness, but today, like every day, it was her world, and she moved within it as if she were both captive and queen of this secluded domain. She rose quietly, careful not to disturb the other girls still asleep in their adjoining chambers, and approached the ornate mirror that reflected the delicate features of her face, framed by loose tendrils of hair that shimmered in the morning light. Her attendants were already preparing the courtyard, laying out brass trays of dates, figs, and sweet breads for the Sultan's morning meal. The air was fragrant with the steam of tea and the delicate aroma of spices, cinnamon, cardamom, and clove mingling to create a scent both comforting and invigorating. Layla's morning began with ritual, a slow bath in warm water infused with rose petals, her skin massaged with scented oils until it glowed softly, and her hair carefully combed and braided into intricate patterns, each braid a quiet testament to skill and patience. The harem was alive with gentle whispers and soft footsteps. Women moved with purpose, yet with a grace that suggested time itself slowed in their presence. Some carried trays, others tended to the gardens, and a few practiced music or poetry, their voices rising and falling like a delicate wind through the palace corridors. Layla walked among them, her heart steady, her mind calm, though she knew the rules of the harem as well as she knew the patterns of the stars. Every gesture, every smile, every bow carried meaning. Every look could be interpreted as favor or disfavor. To live here was to understand the subtle art of presence and patience, and Layla had learned both in ways that were quiet but deep, like water carving stone over years. As the morning sun rose higher, the Sultan's guards announced his approach, a soft drumbeat that echoed faintly through the palace halls. The concubines gathered in their appointed chambers, adjusting robes and arranging hair and jewelry, each hoping for attention, each aware of the careful balance of favor and jealousy that governed their lives. Layla took her place with quiet composure, letting her presence speak without words, her posture calm, her eyes bright with unspoken serenity. The doors opened, and the soft sound of sandals on polished stone filled the hall. The Sultan moved among them, his gaze measuring, discerning, yet tempered by centuries of courtly education and wisdom. He paused at Layla's side, and in that moment, the world narrowed to the rhythm of his steps and the soft rustle of silk. She offered a delicate smile, a nod, a quiet acknowledgement of her presence, and he inclined his head slightly in return. The exchange was brief, almost imperceptible, yet in the intricate hierarchy of the harem, it was a moment of significance, a thread woven into the fabric of her life here, as delicate and enduring as the gold embroidery on her robe. After the Sultan's visit, the harem returned to its own rhythms. Layla wandered the hidden gardens, where fountains whispered over marble basins and birds preened among the roses. The sunlight dappled the ground, turning shadows into patterns of lace and gold. She paused to watch a small fountain where water spilled gently, each droplet catching the light like tiny stars. The beauty of these moments was quiet, unnoticed by many, yet deeply sustaining. Here, the world outside the politics, the intrigues, the vast empire beyond the walls seemed a distant echo, softened by the scent of flowers and the gentle hum of life in miniature. Midday brought lessons and exercises, as concubines were trained in music, literature, and the art of conversation. Layla moved from one activity to another, listening to poetry read aloud, practicing the delicate melodies of the Kanan, and observing the subtle manners required in her interactions with the eunuchs who oversaw their daily lives. Every gesture, every tone, every pause was measured, for knowledge was as much power here as beauty or charm, and Layla had long understood that wisdom, quiet and patient, could outlast even the fleeting attention of the Sultan. Afternoon sunlight spilled across the marble floors, warming her skin and lending a sense of calm to the palace corridors. She rested briefly, lying on a couch draped with soft cushions, allowing herself to close her eyes and drift into the subtle rhythms of palace life. The distant laughter, the trickle of water, the rustle of silk, the low, steady footfalls of guards. Here, in these small, stolen moments, Lila felt the soft pulse of life itself, and sleep, even if momentary, brushed her like a gentle veil. Evening descended slowly, turning the sky into a wash of amber and rose. The harem came alive again, this time with music and dance, the soft patter of tambourines and the sweet strains of the oud filling the chambers. Layla joined in the quiet performances, her movements fluid and restrained, her voice blending softly with the chorus of others, each note a delicate echo of centuries of tradition and expectation. The Sultan would return, and with him the subtle games of favor and attention would resume yet, for now the world belonged to the music, to the gardens, to the quiet beauty of women moving gracefully through the gentle twilight. Night fell fully, and lamps were lit, their flames flickering across walls carved with delicate arabesques. Layla prepared for her final bath of the day, the warm water scented with lavender and honey, the steam curling around her like a protective mist. She dressed in robes of deep blue and soft gold, each fold deliberate, each movement practiced, yet imbued with a personal elegance that no rules could dictate. As she lay once more on her cushions, the soft hum of the harem settling into quiet, she allowed her mind to drift, free yet contained, into the gentle embrace of sleep. Dreams came easily, flowing with the rhythm of water over marble and the murmur of leaves in the garden. Layla moved through visions of distant lands, silent markets and moonlit terraces, always aware, always graceful, a silent observer and participant in the hidden stories of the empire. The harem, with all its beauty and constraint, all its hidden power and quiet despair, became a world unto itself, a place where time was measured not in hours but in gestures, silences, and soft, sustained breaths. And so, beneath the delicate lattice of moonlight, and the soft, scented air of the palace, Layla drifted fully into sleep, her consciousness melding with the gentle cadence of the harem. Each day, like the one that had just passed, was a tapestry of subtle movements, quiet lessons, and small triumphs, and in sleep the intricate beauty of that life became even more vivid, a serene, endless story of silk and roses, of whispers and shadows, of a world both closed and infinite. The night deepened into a velvet darkness, and the harem seemed to breathe as one, a living organism of quiet whispers and soft movements. Layla lay upon her cushions, her body loose, her mind flowing with images of the day. She recalled the Sultan's passing glance, fleeting though it had been, and allowed herself to savor the gentle warmth of recognition, not in pride, but in the quiet knowledge of her presence. Within these walls, moments like these were small islands of affirmation, delicate yet enduring, like petals drifting on a silent stream. Her thoughts wandered to the other concubines, each a universe of gestures, secrets, and quiet ambitions. Some she watched with curiosity, noting how a tilt of the head or a practiced smile could shift attention, how patience often outweighed beauty in influence. Others moved like shadows, almost invisible, yet always present in the subtle interplay of power and favor. Layla had learned to observe without judgment, to participate without overt striving, and to understand the intricate patterns of human behavior as one would trace the lines of an elaborate mosaic. Each relationship was a thread in the delicate tapestry of the harem, and she handled them with gentle care, knowing that even a slight tug could alter the weave. The moon rose higher, pale and steady, spilling its silver light through the lattice windows. Layla rose silently, moving to the small fountain in her chamber where water caught the moonlight like liquid crystal. She cupped the cool water in her hands, letting it trickle over her skin, and listened to its soft, steady song. The quiet of the night was her companion, the gentle rhythm of the fountain, a reminder that even in confinement there was freedom in observation, in reflection, in awareness. Attendants moved softly through the corridors, carrying trays of sweet teas, fruits, and delicate pastries for those who rose early to meditate or study. Layla accepted a small cup of rose-infused tea, savoring the warmth as it spread through her body, a calm anchor in the serene night. She sipped slowly, noticing the subtle fragrance, the way the sweetness lingered on her tongue, and felt the world narrow to the intimacy of sensation, the water, the tea, the faint sighs of her companions as they moved past. By the pre-dawn hours, Layla prepared for another day of ritual and training. Her hair was braided with painstaking care, each strand arranged to frame her face in elegance, each braid a small act of mindfulness. The silk of her robes slid over her skin with a whisper, and as she walked through the corridors, she noticed the way moonlight and shadow played together on the marble floors. The harem, in its stillness, was alive with the quiet movements of care and preparation. Layla moved among them with practiced grace, a soft observer of beauty, discipline, and the faint undercurrent of competition that wove through every smile, every gesture, every step. As dawn broke fully, the Sultan's arrival was announced. The familiar rhythm of approaching footsteps echoed softly, blending with the distant calls of birds and the trickle of fountains. Layla assumed her place among the concubines, her posture poised, her expression calm. The Sultan's glance was brief but deliberate, as she met it with the serene composure she had honed over years. Each moment of recognition, fleeting as it might be, was stored carefully in the quiet chambers of memory, each nod or smile a subtle thread in the fabric of influence. The morning passed in lessons of music, poetry, and literature. Layla listened, practiced, and observed, her attention absorbed yet relaxed. The delicate strains of the oud, the soft pluck of the qanan, and the measured cadence of verses created a soundscape of tranquility, a rhythm that eased the mind even as it demanded focus. Layla's fingers traced invisible patterns on the marble floor, her mind aligning with the music, absorbing each note as a gentle vibration that extended beyond her senses. In the courtyard, she paused among the rose gardens, feeling the petals brush against her fingertips. Birds flitted between the branches, their song a soft accompaniment to the quiet rustle of leaves. Layla inhaled the fragrant air, letting it fill her lungs and expand her awareness. Here, among the flowers and fountains, the weight of the palace seemed to lift, replaced by a profound sense of connection to beauty, patience, and quiet power. Even in the most constrained moments, life revealed itself in subtle gestures, a bee alighting on a bloom, a petal drifting on water, the reflection of sunlight in a tiny puddle, and Layla embraced these moments as a meditation, a gentle exercise in presence. The afternoon unfolded with more study, gentle instruction, and quiet observation of the other concubines. Layla noted the subtle ways attention shifted, how small movements could ripple into influence, how restraint often spoke louder than boldness. She offered gentle guidance to younger girls, her voice soft, her gestures fluid, teaching the lessons of patience, awareness, and graceful movement. Influence in the harem was quiet, pervasive, and almost invisible. To wield it effectively required calm, perception, and restraint, and Layla had long mastered these arts. Evening came slowly, painting the palace in deep amber and rose. Music and soft dancing resumed, filling the corridors and chambers with gentle rhythms. Layla moved fluidly, her steps echoing the subtle cadences of the instruments, her voice blending harmoniously with the chorus of other women. The Sultan's return was anticipated, but she did not rush or strain. She simply allowed the rhythm of her movements to align with the larger flow of life in the harem, trusting that grace and composure would always carry weight. As night deepened once more, Layla retired to her chamber. She prepared her final bath of the day, letting warm water infused with rose and honey cascade over her skin. The scents, the warmth, and the soft light of lamps created a cocoon of serenity. She dressed in flowing silk of deep blue and gold, each fold deliberate yet natural, and lay upon her cushions, letting the gentle hum of the harem settle into her mind. Sleep came easily, carrying with it dreams of quiet gardens, moonlit terraces, distant lands, and the hidden rhythms of palace life. In dreams, Layla moved freely, observing, listening, and participating in the subtle interplay of life, influence, and beauty. Each day, with its repetition, its small triumphs, and its careful navigation of relationships, was preserved in the soft folds of her mind, carried into the night, and woven into the larger tapestry of her existence. Beneath the lattice windows, amid the gentle scent of flowers and the soft murmur of the harem, Layla drifted fully into the deep, restorative sleep that would sustain her for the day ahead. Each breath, each heartbeat, each quiet movement of the night became a gentle rhythm, a lullaby, a timeless pulse that carried her through the intricate, delicate, and endlessly fascinating life of an Ottoman harem concubine. The night stretched slowly, its quietness deepened by the soft flicker of oil lamps and the delicate aroma of jasmine drifting through the open lattice. Layla lay upon her cushions, the soft silk of her robes caressing her skin, her thoughts a quiet river flowing through the gentle landscapes of memory and reflection. She thought of the days that had passed, the small victories and subtle interactions that shaped her existence. In the harem, power was measured not in loud proclamations, but in quiet influence, in the gentle weight of presence, in gestures so small they could almost be mistaken for instinct. Her mind traced the labyrinthine patterns of relationships in the harem. Each concubine a carefully constructed constellation of beauty, wit, and subtle maneuvering. Some she watched with curiosity, noting the faint shift of a gaze, the deliberate tilt of a head, the carefully restrained smile that could convey approval or, in its absence, disfavor. Others moved almost invisibly, their presence felt rather than seen, their quiet mastery of the palace's rules rendering them formidable in ways that were not immediately apparent. Layla understood that to exist here was to perceive without judgment, to act without haste, and to wield subtlety like a finely honed instrument. Rising softly, she walked to her small fountain, the cool marble under her feet grounding her. She cupped the water in her hands, feeling its gentle weight and the soothing chill against her skin. The liquid mirrored the pale light of the moon, rippling gently as if the night itself breathed alongside her. Layla closed her eyes and listened, not only to the fountain, but to the soft chorus of the harem, the rustle of silk, the muted steps of eunuchs carrying late-night messages, the occasional faint murmur of distant voices. Each sound, each movement, carried meaning. Each was a thread in the intricate web of life that surrounded her. Attendants glided silently through the corridors, leaving trays of tea, honeyed pastries, and delicate fruits for those who rose early for study or reflection. Layla accepted a small cup of rose tea, letting the warmth spread through her chest as she inhaled the fragrant steam. It was a moment of ritual, of grounding, of gentle meditation, a practice that kept her mind calm and her senses alive. Here, in these soft, private hours, she felt herself connected to the living heartbeat of the palace, even as she remained secluded in her chamber. As dawn approached, Layla prepared herself for the new day. She braided her hair with deliberate care, each strand falling into place with a rhythm that mirrored her own inner steadiness. Her robes of soft silk slid over her body, warm and fragrant, and she moved through the corridors with the fluid grace she had cultivated over years. The harem itself was waking, its quiet rhythms merging with the first light of day. Birds stirred in the gardens, fountains murmured over marble basins, and the faint scent of herbs and flowers mingled with the sweet trace of rosewater still lingering in the air. When the Sultan's approach was announced, Layla assumed her place with poised calm. His footsteps echoed softly against the polished floors, a familiar rhythm that signaled both anticipation and ritual. The Sultan's glance was brief but meaningful, and she received it with serene composure, knowing that her presence, even if momentary, carried influence. In this quiet exchange, she understood the delicate balance of visibility and discretion, of engagement and restraint, of power hidden within the folds of routine. The day unfolded with lessons and refinement, music, poetry, and literature, each demanding focus yet offering gentle serenity. The soft notes of the oud, the delicate pluck of the qanan, the measured cadence of recited verses all formed a soundscape that soothed the mind while sharpening the senses. Layla moved her hands and feet in harmony with the rhythm, her motions precise yet effortless, her attention fully immersed in the unfolding moment. Even mundane tasks, such as arranging cushions or sweeping the marble floors, became exercises in mindfulness, each motion reinforcing her awareness of space, rhythm, and presence. In the courtyard, the rose gardens glimmered with dew, petals reflecting the soft sunlight like scattered jewels. Layla paused to touch the delicate flowers, inhaling their fragrance, feeling the subtle texture of their petals. The birds sang without urgency, and the water trickled over stone basins with soothing regularity. Here, in the stillness of the garden, she felt her connection to the world around her, to life itself, subtle yet profound. Every detail, the scent of the flowers, the sound of the fountains, the gentle curve of sunlight across marble, became a meditation, a quiet affirmation of existence. The afternoon passed with continued instruction and observation. Layla noted the interactions between the other concubines, the small negotiations of attention and favor, the careful exchanges of smiles and glances. Some gestures were deliberate, some instinctive, yet all contributed to the delicate equilibrium of the harem. She offered guidance to younger girls, her voice soft and deliberate, teaching the art of patience, grace, and subtle influence. In her eyes, even silence could speak volumes, as she wielded it as an instrument as carefully as she did her voice or gestures. As the sun sank low, casting amber light across the palace, music and dance returned. Layla joined in, her steps flowing in harmony with the instruments, her movements a quiet poetry that blended seamlessly with those of others. The Sultan's presence was a gentle undercurrent, a force that informed yet did not dominate her actions. She moved with grace, her mind attuned to rhythm, her body to the flow of music, her awareness to the subtle nuances of attention and favor. Each step, each note, each gesture was part of an intricate ballet of observation and expression, a private mastery within the public rituals of the harem. Night returned fully, and the lamps were lit, casting flickering shadows across carved walls. Layla prepared her final bath, letting the warm, fragrant water soothe her muscles and calm her mind. She dressed in robes of deep blue and gold, arranged her cushions carefully, and lay back to embrace the gentle hum of the palace at night. The harem, in its quiet elegance, became a sanctuary of rhythm and repetition, each day's lessons and observations folding into the next, creating a sense of continuity and calm. Sleep enveloped her slowly, carrying dreams of gardens, terraces, distant lands, and the soft interplay of influence and beauty. In these dreams, Layla moved freely, observing, participating, and reflecting, her consciousness attuned to the subtle music of life. The harem's rhythms, once external, became internal, embedding themselves in her breath, her heartbeat, her awareness, until she was both observer and participant in the endless, serene flow of existence. Beneath the lattice windows, the scent of roses and jasmine, the soft flicker of lamps, and the distant murmur of water, Layla drifted fully into deep, restorative sleep. Each breath, each heartbeat, each soft sound of the harem became a lullaby, a gentle pulse that carried her through the night, through the delicate, endlessly fascinating life of an Ottoman harem concubine, where beauty, patience, and presence wove together into an enduring, serene tapestry of existence. The hours before dawn were Layla's favorite, when the palace seemed suspended between breaths, neither fully asleep nor awake. In this quiet interval, the harem revealed its most tender rhythms. Lamps burned low, their flames steady and patient, while shadows rested softly against carved walls. Layla lay still for a time, listening to the deep hush of the corridors, until the silence itself felt like an invitation rather than an absence. She rose quietly and wrapped herself in a light shawl, stepping barefoot onto the cool marble. The stone held the memory of the night, grounding her thoughts and slowing her movements. As she walked, her steps barely whispered, and she felt as though she were moving not through a palace, but through a living dream shaped of silk, water, and time. She followed a familiar path toward one of the lesser-used courtyards, a place often overlooked in the daylight, but luminous in the soft glow of the moon. The fountain there sang a quieter song than the others, its water falling in slow, deliberate arcs. Layla seated herself beside it, folding her legs beneath her, and allowed the sound to settle into her breathing. In these moments, she felt herself dissolve gently into the world around her, neither separate nor bound, simply present. Her thoughts wandered not with urgency, but with the gentle curiosity of drifting clouds. She remembered her life before the palace, not with longing or regret, but as one recalls a distant shore seen from a calm sea. Those memories had softened over time, losing their sharpness, becoming part of a larger story rather than its beginning. Here, in the harem, her identity had transformed, layered itself with patience, observation, and quiet strength. Layla reflected on the nature of freedom, a concept often whispered about but rarely understood. Within these walls, freedom did not mean movement without limits. It meant mastery of self, the ability to remain composed regardless of circumstance. It was found in the way one listened more than spoke, observed more than acted, waited rather than rushed. She had learned that freedom could exist even in stillness, and that awareness itself was a kind of open sky. As the sky lightened almost imperceptibly, the palace began to stir. Somewhere distant, a door opened softly. A guard shifted his stance. The fountains adjusted their rhythm as attendants began their rounds. Layla rose and returned to her chamber, feeling refreshed, as though the night itself had spoken gently to her and left her steadier than before. Morning rituals unfolded like a familiar prayer. Warm water infused with herbs soothed her skin. Her hair was brushed until it shone, each stroke slow and deliberate. Robes were chosen not for display, but for harmony colors that echoed the sky, the gardens, the quiet elegance of the palace itself. Layla dressed with care, not from vanity, but from respect for the rhythm of the day ahead. The harem gathered as it always did, a constellation of women moving in quiet synchrony. Some exchanged soft words, others shared knowing glances, but most carried an air of calm composure, each understanding her place within the ever-shifting mosaic of palace life. Layla moved among them with gentle ease, neither seeking attention nor avoiding it, her presence steady and reassuring. When the Sultan passed through, the atmosphere subtly changed, like a breeze altering the surface of still water. Layla acknowledged his presence with a respectful inclination of her head, her expression serene. The exchange was brief, yet meaningful in its restraint. She understood that significance here was rarely loud. It lived in the unspoken, in the pauses between words, in the spaces where attention lingered for just a heartbeat longer than expected. The remainder of the morning flowed gently. Lessons continued, not only in art and language, but in perception itself. Layla listened as poetry was recited, each verse unfolding slowly, inviting contemplation rather than applause. She practiced calligraphy, the brush gliding across parchment with quiet confidence. Each letter was shaped with care, reminding her that even the smallest mark could carry intention and grace. Later, in the gardens, she walked beneath cypress trees, their shadows long and soothing. The air was cool, the scent of earth and leaves grounding her senses. She paused often, letting her attention rest on simple things, the curve of a leaf, the pattern of light on stone, the steady flight of birds overhead. These moments were her private sanctuary, where time seemed to loosen its hold. As the afternoon settled in, the palace grew warm and languid. Cushions were arranged in shaded alcoves, and many concubines rested, their conversations reduced to murmurs. Layla reclined with a book of poetry, not reading so much as absorbing the rhythm of the words. The quiet weight of the day pressed gently against her awareness, inviting stillness rather than sleep. Evening arrived like a slow exhale. Lamps were lit once more, their glow golden and comforting. Music returned, softer now, more reflective. Layla joined the others, her movements unhurried, her gestures flowing like water. There was no urgency in the dance, only continuity, a shared understanding of rhythm and balance. When night finally reclaimed the palace, Layla withdrew to her chamber. The final bath of the day washed away the lingering warmth, leaving her calm and refreshed. She arranged her cushions, extinguished one lamp, and lay down beneath the patterned shadows cast by the remaining flame. As sleep approached, her thoughts grew slower, softer. The day did not end so much as dissolve, its moments blending into one another like fading colors. The harem breathed around her, a vast, quiet presence that held countless lives within its walls, each unfolding in gentle, overlapping rhythms. Layla closed her eyes and surrendered to rest, her breath deep and even. Dreams came not as stories but as sensations: cool water, warm light, distant music. In sleep she was neither concubine nor subject, neither observer nor observed. She simply existed, carried by the timeless pulse of the palace, drifting peacefully through the night. The night held its silence with a gentle patience, as if the palace itself were careful not to disturb those resting within its walls. Layla slept deeply for a time, her breathing slow and even, her body fully surrendered to the softness of cushions and the faint warmth lingering in the air. When she stirred again, it was not from restlessness, but from a natural turning of the night, a subtle shift that drew her awareness back to the present. She did not open her eyes immediately. Instead, she listened. The distant fountains whispered steadily, their rhythm unchanged. Somewhere far along a corridor, a soft footstep passed and faded. The scent of jasmine still lingered, delicate and reassuring. Wrapped in these sensations, Layla felt neither urgency nor thought, only a calm continuity, as though she floated gently within the palace's breath. Eventually, she rose and sat quietly, drawing her shawl around her shoulders. She moved to the window and gazed out through the lattice, watching the moon hang low over the gardens. Silver light spilled across tiled roofs and quiet courtyards, turning familiar shapes into soft abstractions. The world appeared simplified at night, reduced to form and feeling rather than purpose or demand. Layla often found comfort in these moments of quiet wakefulness. They belonged to no one else, carried no expectations, and asked nothing of her except her presence. She rested her hands on the sill and let her thoughts drift again, not toward ambition or fear, but toward understanding. Life in the harem had taught her that meaning was rarely revealed through effort. Instead, it unfolded when one learned to wait, to notice, to remain still long enough for truth to emerge on its own. She thought of the many women who shared these walls with her, each shaped by her own story, her own adjustments to palace life. Some found comfort quickly, embracing routine and ritual as anchors. Others struggled quietly, their smiles practiced, their thoughts wandering beyond the walls. Layla had learned to sense these differences without naming them, offering kindness where she could, distance where it was wiser. Harmony here was fragile, sustained not by force but by restraint. When she returned to her cushions, sleep welcomed her again, gently and without resistance. This time, her dreams carried her through long corridors that seemed endless yet familiar, their arches repeating softly into the distance. She walked calmly, unafraid, her footsteps echoing faintly, as though confirming her presence rather than announcing it. Doors opened silently as she passed, revealing gardens bathed in twilight, fountains glowing faintly, and open skies stretching beyond walls that no longer confined. Morning arrived slowly, as it always did. The first light crept across the floor, touching carved wood and polished stone with a muted glow. Layla awoke refreshed, her body light, her mind clear. She greeted the day without haste, allowing the familiar rituals to unfold at their own pace. Warm water, scented oils, gentle hands arranging her hair, each act grounded her once more in the steady rhythm of palace life. As she moved through the harem, she sensed the day would be an ordinary one, and this pleased her. Ordinary days carried a quiet stability, an assurance that nothing demanded urgency. Lessons proceeded calmly, conversations remained soft and respectful, and even the palace air felt settled, as though it too had decided to rest within itself. Later, while walking through a shaded gallery, Layla paused beside a long window overlooking the Bosphorus. The water shimmered faintly in the distance, its surface calm and unbroken. She watched it for a long while, allowing the sight to slow her thoughts even further. Ships passed slowly, their movement unhurried, their destinations unknown but unimportant. The water flowed regardless, steady and patient. The afternoon passed as gently as the morning. Layla spent time embroidering, her fingers moving with quiet precision. The repetition soothed her, each stitch anchoring her awareness in the present. Nearby, others worked in similar silence, the shared calm creating a sense of collective ease. No one rushed, no one spoke unnecessarily. Time stretched comfortably, like a long breath held without strain. When evening returned, it did so with familiar grace. Lamps were lit. Music drifted once more through the corridors, slower than before, reflective rather than celebratory. Layla listened more than she played, content to let sound wash over her without response. She felt no need to impress or distinguish herself. Simply being present felt sufficient. As night settled again, Layla prepared for rest with quiet gratitude. The day had passed without conflict or surprise, leaving her balanced and calm. She lay down, the patterned shadows dancing softly across the walls, and allowed her thoughts to fade naturally, without effort. Sleep came easily, deep and unbroken. The palace continued its quiet vigil around her, holding its many lives gently through the hours of darkness. Within that vast stillness, Layla rested peacefully, carried by the enduring rhythm of fountains, moonlight, and time itself. The palace remained wrapped in its nocturnal stillness, a stillness so complete it felt intentional, as though the stones themselves had agreed to rest. Layla slept for many hours without stirring, her body fully surrendered to the rhythm she had learned to trust. When awareness returned, it did so gently, like a tide that does not rush the shore. She lay quietly, eyes half closed, noticing the faint shift of air as dawn approached. The harem was never entirely silent, yet at this hour its sounds were softened, rounded at the edges. Water continued to murmur in distant courtyards. Somewhere a bird stirred, testing its voice before committing to song. These sounds did not call her to action. They merely reminded her that time moved forward without demand. Rising slowly, she wrapped herself in a pale robe and stepped into the corridor. The marble beneath her feet was cool, grounding, familiar. She walked without destination, letting instinct guide her steps through passages she knew as well as her own breath. At every turn, the palace revealed small variations, light touching a wall differently than the day before, a shadow lingering where it had not, the faint scent of citrus drifting from a garden beyond. She paused near a narrow window where morning light slipped through patterned stone. Dust motes floated lazily in the beam, turning the air itself into something visible and slow. Layla watched them for a long while, letting her thoughts dissolve into observation. In these moments, she felt the deepest peace, when there was nothing to remember and nothing to anticipate. Attendants soon appeared, their movements quiet and unintrusive. The day's preparations began as they always did, unhurried and practiced. Warm water, fragrant oils, soft cloths. Layla accepted each step without resistance, allowing the rituals to anchor her gently back into form. Her reflection in the mirror seemed familiar yet distant, not something to evaluate, but simply to acknowledge. As the morning unfolded, lessons resumed in a calm, measured cadence. Today's poetry spoke of rivers and patience, of mountains that stood unmoved by time. Layla listened carefully, not analyzing meaning, but allowing the sound of the words to settle into her. She had learned that understanding often arrived later, quietly, long after effort had ceased. Later, she walked once more through the gardens. The roses were heavy with bloom, their petals relaxed and open, unafraid of the sun. Bees moved lazily from flower to flower, unhurried, certain of their purpose. Layla sat beneath a fig tree and closed her eyes, letting warmth settle over her shoulders. The garden felt timeless, untouched by the rules that governed the palace halls. In the afternoon, she rested with the others, cushions arranged in shaded alcoves. Conversation was sparse and gentle, often dissolving into shared silence. Layla welcomed these pauses. Silence here was not emptiness. It was a shared understanding that nothing needed to be filled. As evening approached, the palace shifted once more. Lamps glowed softly. Music returned like a familiar friend. Layla participated lightly, her movements minimal, her presence relaxed. There was no effort in her gestures, no intention beyond harmony. The day had asked nothing difficult of her, and she returned that kindness by remaining open and calm. When night fell again, it did so without ceremony. Layla withdrew to her chamber, prepared her space, and lay down. The air was cool, the scents familiar, the shadows comforting. Her thoughts slowed naturally, uncoiling from the day without resistance. Sleep claimed her gently, drawing her inward rather than pulling her away. Dreams came softly, water flowing, leaves moving, light shifting across stone. There were no faces, no voices, only sensation and continuity. She rested within that dream space as she rested within the palace itself, aware, supported, untroubled. And so the hours passed, one breath following another, the night holding her in its quiet embrace. The palace continued to exist around her, steady and unchanged, while Layla slept deeply, carried forward by the calm, unbroken rhythm of life within the Ottoman harem. The palace breathed on, steady and unchanging, as if time itself had learned to move more softly within its walls. Layla remained asleep for a long while, her dreams unremarkable yet comforting, filled with gentle sensations rather than images. When she stirred again, it was with the calm awareness of someone who had rested deeply, her body and mind aligned in quiet harmony. She opened her eyes to the pale light of early morning filtering through the lattice. The patterns on the wall had shifted slightly since the day before, familiar yet new, like a repeated melody played with a subtle variation. She watched the light for a moment, feeling no need to rise immediately. There was comfort in lingering, in allowing the day to arrive fully before greeting it. When she finally stood, she moved with unhurried grace, washing her hands and face with cool water that refreshed without startling. The scent of herbs clung faintly to her skin, grounding her in the present moment. She dressed simply, choosing soft fabrics that moved easily, and stepped into the corridor just as the palace began to awaken around her. The harem stirred quietly. Doors opened and closed without sound. Attendants moved with practiced ease, carrying linens, bowls, and trays, as though guided by an invisible rhythm. Layla passed them with a gentle nod, her presence acknowledged without words. In this shared silence, there was mutual understanding, a collective agreement to let the day unfold naturally. Morning lessons took place in a sunlit hall where the air felt lighter, touched by warmth and open space. Today, the focus was on listening to music without anticipation, to poetry without analysis, to silence without discomfort. Layla found this lesson easy. She had been practicing it for years, though she had never given it a name. Later, she wandered through the quieter parts of the palace, places where footsteps rarely echoed and time seemed especially slow. She traced the carved patterns on the walls with her eyes, appreciating the patience it must have taken to shape such detail. Each curve and line felt like a meditation made visible, a reminder that care, when repeated, became beauty. The gardens welcomed her once more in the afternoon. The sun hung high but gentle, softened by drifting clouds. Layla sat beside a shallow pool where water reflected the sky, its surface barely disturbed. She watched the reflection shift with each passing breeze, noting how even the calmest surface responded to the smallest change. There was comfort in that knowledge that change need not be disruptive to be real. As the day waned, shadows lengthened and the palace cooled. Layla returned indoors, where the scent of evening lamps and polished wood created a sense of closure. The activities of the harem slowed, voices lowering, movements growing more deliberate. It was as though the palace itself guided everyone toward rest. When night came again, Layla welcomed it without thought. She prepared her chamber, arranged her cushions, and lay down beneath the soft glow of a single lamp. The quiet felt complete, wrapping around her like a familiar garment. Sleep followed easily. Her breath deepened, her thoughts dissolved, and the world narrowed to rhythm and warmth. The palace remained, holding its shape and silence, while Layla drifted gently into another long, peaceful night. The night lingered, deep and unhurried, as though it had nowhere else to be. Layla slept without disturbance, her rest unfolding in long, even waves. When she shifted in her sleep, it was only to settle more comfortably, her body instinctively finding ease. The palace remained attentive in its quiet way, fountains flowing, walls holding warmth, lamps dimmed to a soft glow that neither demanded nor distracted. In time, her awareness returned gently, not as a thought but as a sensation, a soft readiness, a calm openness. She lay still, eyes closed, listening to the faint sounds that marked the turning of hours. Somewhere, a breeze moved through the gardens, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and leaves. The air felt fresh, renewed, as though the night itself had exhaled. When she rose, it was slowly, deliberately, honoring the softness that still surrounded her. She wrapped herself in a light robe and stepped into the corridor, where the marble felt cool and reassuring beneath her feet. The palace at this hour felt expansive, its long passages stretching quietly into the distance, inviting movement without expectation. She walked toward an inner courtyard where a single lamp still burned beside a fountain. The water fell in a steady, calming rhythm, each drop catching the light before disappearing into the basin below. Layla sat nearby, letting the sound guide her breathing. In these moments, she felt no separation between herself and her surroundings. The palace was not something she inhabited. It was something she moved with, something that shaped her days and nights as gently as water shapes stone. As dawn approached, the sky softened from deep blue to pale gray. The birds began their tentative calls, testing the morning air. Layla remained seated, watching the light change almost imperceptibly, appreciating the patience required to notice such transitions. This was a skill she had learned well, seeing without seeking, allowing without grasping. Eventually, she returned to her chamber as the harem stirred. Attendants moved quietly, preparing the day with calm efficiency. Layla accepted their care with gratitude, letting warm water and gentle hands guide her back into form. The rituals felt familiar and comforting, a reminder that continuity itself could be a source of peace. The morning passed gently, as so many had before. Lessons unfolded without urgency. Conversations remained soft, often giving way to silence. Layla found herself especially attentive to pauses, the spaces between words, between notes of music, between steps along the corridor. She had learned that these spaces held as much meaning as the sounds that filled them. In the afternoon, she rested in a shaded alcove, the light filtered through carved screens. Patterns shifted slowly across the floor, marking the passage of time without the need for clocks or bells. Layla closed her eyes and breathed evenly, feeling the warmth settle into her muscles, the calm deepen within her. Evening arrived with its familiar grace. Lamps were lit. The palace glowed softly, as though illuminated from within. Layla joined the others briefly, sharing music and quiet movement, then withdrew when the day felt complete. There was no sense of ending, only a gentle return to stillness. That night, sleep came almost immediately. Her dreams were indistinct, More like feelings than images: cool water, warm light, a sense of floating. She rested deeply, unburdened by thought, supported by the steady rhythm of the palace. Hours passed. The night held. The palace endured. And within it, Layla slept on, peaceful and untroubled, carried forward by the calm continuity of days that flowed one into another, like water moving endlessly through stone. The palace entered another long, quiet cycle of rest, its rhythms unchanged, its presence steady. Layla slept deeply, her breath rising and falling with unbroken ease. The hours moved past her without friction, and when awareness returned, it did so without thought or urgency. She remained still for a long time, wrapped in the gentle weight of sleep that had not yet fully released her. When she finally opened her eyes, the chamber was bathed in a muted silver light. Dawn had not yet claimed the sky, but it was near. The lattice cast familiar patterns across the walls, softened by the half-light, and the air felt cool and calm against her skin. She lingered in that in-between state, where waking and dreaming still touched, and where nothing yet required a name. Layla rose quietly and moved to the window, resting her hands lightly against the carved stone. Beyond the palace walls, the world waited without impatience. The water in the distance reflected the sky's gradual change, and the gardens below held their breath, leaves still, flowers closed, earth cool and dark. She watched as the light shifted almost imperceptibly, appreciating how change could occur without disturbance. She returned to her cushions and sat for a while, allowing her thoughts to drift without direction. Life within the harem no longer felt complex to her. Its rules, once sharp and demanding, had softened into something predictable and steady. She understood now that adaptation was not surrender, but a quiet alignment with reality. In that understanding she had found peace. As the palace awakened, familiar sounds returned: the gentle movement of attendants, the faint clink of vessels, the distant murmur of fountains refreshed for the day. Layla prepared herself slowly, letting each ritual unfold without haste. Warm water refreshed her, soft fabric settled against her skin, and the simple act of dressing became a meditation, grounding her in the present. The morning passed as gently as all others. There was poetry, music, and long stretches of silence where no instruction was given and none was needed. Layla listened, observed, and moved through the halls with quiet assurance. She no longer measured her days by attention or favor, but by balance, by how evenly her breath flowed, how calmly her thoughts rested. Later, she returned to the gardens one final time that day, seating herself beside a familiar fountain. The water fell steadily, unchanged, its sound as calming as it had been from the beginning. She watched ripples spread across the surface, dissolve, and begin again. There was comfort in repetition, in knowing that some things endured regardless of circumstance. When evening came, it arrived softly, without announcement. Lamps were lit, voices lowered, movements slowed. The palace seemed to draw inward, preparing once more for rest. Layla felt no resistance to the closing of the day. She welcomed it as one welcomes sleep itself. That night she lay down earlier than usual, her body relaxed, her mind clear. The familiar scents surrounded her: rose, wood, warm stone. The distant fountains sang their quiet song. She closed her eyes, feeling herself settle completely, as though the palace had gently gathered her into its steady embrace. Sleep arrived not as an ending, but as a continuation. There were no sharp dreams, no wandering thoughts. Only calm, depth, and rhythm. Breath followed breath. Moment followed moment. The palace remained, constant and unmoving, while time passed without effort. And so Layla rested, fully at peace, carried forward by the unbroken flow of days and nights within the Ottoman harem. Her life, shaped by ritual and stillness, by patience and quiet awareness, continued in gentle harmony, each moment complete, each breath unhurried, each night deep and endlessly calm. The palace breathed, the fountains flowed, and Layla slept. The calm did not break. It simply continued, unfolding like a long breath that never quite ended. Layla slept through the remaining hours of the night, her rest deep and untroubled, as though she had slipped beneath the surface of a still lake where nothing stirred. The palace, steadfast and ancient, kept its quiet watch, unchanged by the passing of time. When waking came again, it arrived so softly it felt optional. Layla lingered in the warmth of her bedding, aware of her breath, of the faint texture of silk beneath her fingers, of the distant, Familiar sound of water moving through stone channels. There was no urgency in her body, no sharp edge to her thoughts. She allowed herself to remain still until the sense of readiness arose naturally, like a leaf drifting to the surface of water. She rose and moved slowly through her chamber, every gesture unhurried. The light filtering through the lattice was gentle, diffused, neither bright nor dim. It touched the walls, the floor, the low table beside her cushions, revealing nothing new, yet making everything feel quietly renewed. She washed, dressed, and stepped into the corridor, becoming once more part of the palace's slow awakening. The harem moved as it always did, guided by rhythms older than memory. Attendants glided past with quiet efficiency. Doors opened and closed with care. The air filled gradually with familiar scents, warm bread, herbs, polished wood. Layla passed through it all with ease, her presence neither drawing attention nor withdrawing from it. She had learned the art of belonging without attachment, of participation without tension. The morning lessons felt especially gentle. Music was played softly, almost tentatively, as if the instruments themselves were still waking. Poetry was read at an unhurried pace, each word allowed to settle fully before the next followed. Layla listened without effort, letting sound pass through her rather than linger. Understanding was no longer something she sought. It arrived when needed and otherwise rested quietly in the background. Later, she found herself once more in the gardens, seated beside the same fountain she had visited countless times before. The water fell exactly as it always had, each drop familiar, reassuring. She watched the ripples spread and fade again, and felt a deep sense of alignment. Nothing here resisted its own nature, nothing hurried toward an ending. As the day moved forward, it did so smoothly, without interruption. There were no sudden demands, no sharp emotions, no moments that pulled her out of herself. Layla moved from place to place as though carried by an invisible current, her awareness steady, her breath calm. When evening returned, it brought with it a sense of completeness rather than closure. Lamps were lit, their glow warm and inviting. The palace softened, drawing inward as it always did. Layla participated briefly in the quiet rituals of the night, then withdrew, feeling no separation between activity and rest. In her chamber, she prepared for sleep with familiar care. The final lamp was dimmed. The air cooled. The scents of rose and night flowers settled around her. She lay down and closed her eyes, her body relaxing instantly, as though it had been waiting for this moment all along. Sleep took her gently, without transition. There were no distinct dreams this time, only depth and stillness. Breath followed breath. Time moved on unnoticed. And in that deep, continuous rest, Layla's life within the Ottoman harem flowed on exactly as it had, quiet, measured, enduring. Days and nights passed without urgency or resistance, each one complete in itself, each one dissolving seamlessly into the next. The palace stood. The fountains flowed. The lamps glowed and dimmed. And Layla slept, peaceful and untroubled, carried by the timeless rhythm of a world that asked only patience, presence, and rest. And so the calm remained. The rhythm did not change. It widened, becoming something so steady that it felt endless. Layla rested within it, as though her own heartbeat had synchronized with the palace itself. Stone, water, air, and silence moved together, each supporting the other without effort. Nothing needed attention. Nothing needed to be remembered. Her sleep flowed onward, smooth and uninterrupted. When awareness returned, it did not rise sharply. It hovered gently, like mist lifting slowly from cool ground. She sensed the room before she saw it, the calm weight of the walls, the familiar shape of the space, the faint fragrance that never fully faded. Opening her eyes felt less like waking and more like continuing something that had never truly stopped. She remained still, listening. Somewhere far away, a door closed softly. Water continued its patient journey through hidden channels. The palace breathed, and she breathed with it. There was no distinction between inner and outer quiet. They had become the same. When she finally moved, it was with the same unhurried grace that marked all her days. She rose, washed, dressed, and stepped once more into the corridors that held no surprises. The patterns on the walls welcomed her back, unchanged, comforting in their repetition. She traced them briefly with her eyes, feeling the reassurance of familiarity. Morning passed gently. The routines unfolded as they always did, smooth and predictable. Voices were low, movements soft. Layla participated without effort, her mind calm, her body relaxed. Each task completed itself without drawing attention, like a breath taken and released without thought. At midday, light pooled in the courtyards, warm but not demanding. She sat in its presence, feeling it touch her skin lightly, then move on. Shadows shifted slowly, marking time without urgency. She watched them with quiet appreciation, content to let the world move at its own pace. The afternoon brought the same gentle calm. She walked through halls where footsteps seemed to fade before fully forming. She paused near open windows, allowing air to pass over her face. Each sensation was subtle, soothing, easily released. Nothing lingered too long, nothing insisted on being held. As evening approached, the palace softened again. Lamps appeared one by one, their glow familiar and steady. The sounds of the day receded, leaving only what was necessary. Layla felt her energy naturally turn inward, drawn toward rest without resistance. Night arrived like a familiar companion. She returned to her chamber, arranged her cushions, and lay down as though following a path she had walked countless times before. Her body relaxed immediately, recognizing the safety of this moment. Breath slowed, muscles released. Thoughts faded until they were no longer distinguishable. Sleep came once more, deep and continuous. It wrapped around her gently, carrying her beyond awareness without abruptness. Time moved on, but it did not disturb her. The palace continued its quiet vigil, unchanged and unchanging. Hours passed. Then more hours. Perhaps days followed nights, and nights followed days, but within the stillness it no longer mattered. Layla remained at rest, sustained by repetition, comforted by routine, held by a world that moved slowly enough to feel eternal. The fountains flowed, the walls stood, the lamps glowed and dimmed again. And in this endless, gentle cycle, nothing demanded attention, nothing broke the calm. The story continued not through events, but through stillness itself, soft, steady, and complete. The stillness stretched onward, unbroken and kind. It did not feel empty. It felt full in a quiet way, like a room that had been carefully arranged and needed nothing added. Layla remained within this calm, carried forward by days that resembled one another so closely they seemed to blend into a single, continuous moment. When she next became aware of herself, there was no clear boundary between sleeping and waking. Her eyes opened slowly, but her body stayed relaxed, as though rest itself had not yet finished speaking. Light touched the edges of the room in a familiar pattern, filtered through carved screens that had not changed in her memory. She watched the light move, unhurried, feeling no need to rise. Eventually she did. Not because she had to, but because motion felt like the natural next step in the long, gentle sequence of her life. She washed her hands in cool water, feeling the sensation ground her softly. The sound of water was steady, predictable, and calming, just like everything else here. The corridors welcomed her again. Their quiet was never absolute, but it was consistent footsteps softened by rugs, voices lowered out of habit rather than instruction. Layla moved through them with ease, her presence light, her awareness calm. She was neither anticipating nor remembering. She was simply moving, breathing, being. Morning activities unfolded without distinction from the day before. Lessons blended into conversations, conversations into silence. Nothing demanded sharp attention. Nothing pulled her away from the gentle center she carried within herself. Even time felt less like something passing and more like something surrounding her, holding everything in place. In the gardens, the air felt especially calm. Leaves barely moved. Water reflected the sky with little distortion. Layla sat near the fountain again, feeling the stone beneath her, cool and solid. She watched the water fall and gather, and felt her thoughts mirror its motion, appearing briefly, then dissolving without effort. There was comfort in knowing what the day would bring, not in detail, but in essence. It would bring quiet, it would bring softness, it would bring rest. And then it would gently step aside for night, just as it always did. As afternoon faded, the palace shifted almost imperceptibly. Light dimmed, sound softened. Layla felt the familiar inward turn of her energy, the natural slowing that came without instruction. She moved through the evening rituals with ease, each action familiar enough to require no thought. When night arrived again, it felt neither early nor late. It felt correct. She returned to her chamber and prepared for sleep, the routine itself soothing, like a lullaby repeated countless times. She lay down, her body settling immediately, as though it recognized the safety of this moment before her mind did. Sleep came smoothly, without pause. There were no vivid dreams, no wandering thoughts, only depth, warmth, and the steady rhythm of breath. The palace remained awake in its own way, holding its form, maintaining its silence. Time continued, but it did not intrude. Days followed nights, nights followed days. The sequence was gentle and unremarkable, and that was its greatest comfort. Layla rested within it all, her life flowing forward without urgency, without strain. She was part of a pattern that asked nothing more than presence. And in that presence, she found a peace so complete that it felt endless. The fountains continued. The walls endured. The quiet remained. And the story moved forward, softly, without ever needing to announce itself.